Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well today. We've got week 11 on tap, and as has now become a weekly tradition on this channel, I like to take a look at the upcoming games and figure out who we, as Seahawks fans, might have an interest in pulling for or pulling against or what have you. So we've got a game tonight, and the intrigue starts with the game tonight. So thought I'd go ahead and just open her up. First of all, I will be streaming on Twitch during most of the Thursday night football game tonight. I'll be doing Ragnarok, watching the game on Twitch actually, because Twitch streams the game. Which, by the way, to those of you who don't have Amazon Prime and maybe want to watch the Thursday night football games, just watch it on Twitch. I don't know why Amazon Prime's allowing that. It seems like a very easy workaround to having to get Prime to watch the game, but either way, I will be live tonight playing Ragnarok while the Thursday night football game plays out. So, the game, Titans, Packers, pretty obvious here. We have no particular need to see the Titans win or lose games. They're over there in the AFC. So, of course, playing this Packers team that now has a little bit of life on behind them, we want to see the Titans help bury the Green Bay Packers. And you look at the NFC right now, you've got the wild card race. I think a lot of us know, I think a lot of us are aware of the very realistic possibility that the 49ers end up winning the NFC West. If that ends up happening, you're looking at the wild card and you're saying, okay, the Giants and the Cowboys are two teams in relative pole position to get a wild card spot. And then you would have the Seahawks. Those would be your three wild card teams. So the question is, who's going to get involved here at the end of the year to where they could take a spot from one of those teams? It's the Commanders and the Packers, and right now it doesn't look like anybody else is likely to get involved. I know there are some teams out there in the NFC that have the same record as the Packers, like the Cardinals, but we own the tiebreaker over the Cardinals no matter what, so I'm not as worried about that. Now, the Packers don't have the tiebreaker against the Commanders, so the Commanders are probably a bigger threat. But there is certainly a scenario where a team like the Packers could sneak in and steal a wild card spot and leave Seattle out in the cold if they don't finish the season very strong. So even if it's unlikely the Packers get involved in the playoff race at this point, I think that it's pretty clear we should be rooting for the Titans to help bury this team. The Packers still have to play the Vikings again. They got a couple other games against good teams left, so we're probably okay. Then we get to Sunday, and we're going to take a look at this early slate, the 10 a.m. slate. We've got the Bears visiting the Falcons. Great opportunity for the Bears to bank a win, which will, in this case, help us on multiple levels. One, we want the Bears to pack away a couple wins so they're not up there at the very top of the draft because, of course, we have Denver's pick. Denver is in play for a very high pick, top 5. The more games a team like the Bears win, the less likely it is that they get involved as a top 5 picking team that can pick ahead of Denver. So we want the Bears to win. And this is a great opportunity for them to take a win against a decent but very flawed Falcons team. They're 4-6. Now, I'm not too worried about competing with the Falcons in terms of a playoff spot because the Falcons' only realistic path is to win their division because they're just not that good of a team. They need to beat Tampa Bay when they play them again in a couple weeks here, and then they need to get on a little bit of a hot streak and finish first in the division, or else playoffs are unlikely. But you look at it and you go, they're 4-6, and remember, they beat us head to head. So it's not something I want to completely ignore yet. So, yeah, we're rooting for the Falcons to take some L's to knock them out of the playoff race. I don't see it. I don't see them getting involved in the wild card race. I think it's division or bust for them. But nevertheless, they're certainly more of a threat than the Bears to us, especially because they have that tiebreaker. We got the Browns at the Bills, and apparently the game is actually in Detroit. So that's interesting plot twist. And I guess we're just going to root for the Browns because they're also a team that is threatening to be or they'll have their pick near the top of the draft. They're not going to have the pick because they traded it for Watson, but we want that pick to be below wherever Denver picks. That's the only real intrigue from this game. I don't believe the Broncos even play either of these teams this year, so it's not like there's a strength of schedule argument to be made. The only intrigue is we want the Browns to bank some wins so they're not picking at the very top of the draft, making it a little easier for the Broncos pick to be really high. But that's it. CBS, 10 a.m., we have the Eagles and the Colts. Yeah, there's not really anything going on here. The Broncos did play the Colts, and we know strength of schedule matters for your draft pick. But that's about it. I mean, we're not catching the Eagles, so I'm not really thinking about it from that angle. Unless the Eagles completely melt down, we're not catching them for any kind of playoff spot, so I'm not thinking about that. Now, granted, you could still root for the Colts just because. I mean, crazier things have happened, right? Crazier things have happened than a team starting 8-0 and then melting down and barely making the playoffs or not making the playoffs, sure. But realistically speaking, the only angle I see this game mattering from is the Broncos' strength of schedule. And if you go to Tankathon, you can see that the primary tiebreaker for draft picks is your strength of schedule. So I guess we may as well root for the Colts, but it's pretty minor, our rooting interest here. And speaking of minor rooting interest, this next game, Jets-Patriots, also pretty insignificant for us. The only angle where this game matters at all, because neither of these teams are likely to be picking in the top 5. Neither of these teams are in our conference. We do play the Jets, but who really cares about that until we play them? Is that the Jets played the Broncos this year, so there is a little bit of an argument to be made for strength of schedule. So I guess we want the Patriots to win, but it's very thin. So I guess if you can bring yourself to root for Bill Belichick and the Patriots and the evil empire, then do it. But if you can't, then I don't blame you. It's not really that big of a deal. So I guess if you're really trying to dig for the answer, I guess you're rooting for the Patriots to beat the Jets just because of the strength of schedule stuff with Denver. Rams at Saints. Both these NFC teams are on the cusp of being done or are done. I kind of feel like the Saints are done no matter what. I think it's a little more likely the Rams find some life down the stretch and are able to revive their season. Slightly more likely, just because they are going to get Stafford back. They're going to get They're going to get a guy like a Brian Allen back. Eventually, they'll get Cooper Kupp back. But there's really no overcoming their offensive line problem, so I seriously doubt it. But I think it's more likely than the Saints. The Saints feel like they've basically given up on the season. So I look at the Rams and I see a team that's going to find a way to a couple wins later in the year. With the Saints, I don't know if I see it. So I'm going to root for the Saints. Obviously, the Rams are in our division, so it's not that hard of a pick anyway. But even ignoring that, I think we want the Saints to bank a win or two just for draft pick purposes with the Broncos. So, yeah, I'm going to say we pull for the Saints. Not terribly hard of a decision. We got the Lions and the Giants next up. Pretty obvious here. The Lions are a team that may end up picking really high in the draft. We'd prefer them not to. And the Giants are a team that will probably be in the wild card race at the end of the year. We would prefer they get knocked down a little bit so we can be on the same level as them because we own the tiebreaker. We only need it to be pulled even. We don't need it to be, we don't need to be a full game ahead or anything like that. So it's very reasonable. So we're looking for the Giants to get knocked down a peg or two by a team like the Lions. Panthers, Ravens. So nominally, you would look at this game and go, okay, the Panthers are an NFC team, the Ravens are an AFC team. We always want the AFC team to win. But the Panthers are not really a threat to get back in the playoff race at this point. They're 3-7. They actually haven't won a game on the road the whole year. So you got to figure they're going to stack up a few more losses just by default the rest of the way. They're a bad team. They, especially with PJ Walker supposedly missing the game now. So hard for me to take that terribly seriously. Both teams play the Broncos this year, so strength of schedule doesn't really matter. But what matters is the Panthers will be in contention for a top pick this year in all likelihood. And because of that, we actually want them to bank a win or two. So I'm going to actually say we want the Panthers to win this game just for the draft pick purposes. I think that's more important than the thin possibility of the Panthers getting involved in the playoffs at this point. I don't think it's a realistic possibility, so I'm not really thinking about it. So yeah, rooting for the Panthers. Commanders at Texans. Yeah, definitely rooting for the Texans here. If they could come through for us, that would be a big one. You knock the Commanders down, and the Commanders right now are the team that is clearly in the NFC the most likely to get involved with the playoff race at the last second and maybe steal a wild card spot from a team like us or Dallas or New York. The Texans are currently in pole position to get the number one overall pick, which is not what we want. Um, it's going to be hard for anybody to knock them off that perch. Honestly, they've really mastered the art of playing a competitive game and still losing by like 10 points. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but in order for it to happen, they're probably going to need to score an upset like this game against the Commanders. Then we get to the late slot. We got 1 p.m., 105. We got the Raiders versus the Broncos. Obviously rooting for the Raiders. And this is a big sequence for the Broncos draft pick. I mean, their season's already done. It's not a big sequence for their season. Their season's toast. But if they lose to the Raiders at home, they might just pull the plug on the season. They might just go, okay, Randy Gregory, you're out for the year. No point in bringing you back right now. Wilson, we're going to sit you for a little bit. There's no point in putting you out there when you're playing with all these injuries. They might fire Hackett at that point, and honestly, I don't know if that's going to hurt or help them. But I don't see anybody on that staff they can promote who puts the fear of God in me that, oh, they're going to fix this offense now. So if they lose this game, and then you're looking at the Panthers next week, another game where you would figure they are probably going to be favored and should win. If they lose those two games, I don't know if they win another game the rest of the year. So if you want a top 3 pick, these next 2 games for the Broncos are going to tell you everything you need to know. We got Cowboys-Vikings as well. A mysterious Cowboys by 1.5 points in the spread on the road. Yeah, I figured that one out. I'm not thinking about catching the Vikings at this point. They're a little too far ahead. They're a little too good. And they're probably they're pretty much guaranteed to win that division. So if you do catch them, it'll be for seeding. It'll be for like the 1 seed or the 2 seed. And that's less important than competing for a wild card spot. That's more likely going to be a little bit of a contest. So I'm rooting for the Vikings to take down the Cowboys. We want the Cowboys to get knocked down a little bit here. So if we end up in some sort of wild card competing situation, ooh, I just made my green screen. Wow. Okay. So we haven't fixed the problem entirely yet, but hey, that's kind of cool. Yeah, rooting for the Vikings 100%. No problems there. Bengals, Steelers, AFC versus AFC divisional matchup over there. The only real rooting interest would just be the Steelers are in contention for a top pick. We'd prefer that they win a game or 2 probably so they don't get that top pick. So yeah, rooting for the Steelers. We need them to win a game or 2 at some point so they are guaranteed to get that pick below where Denver's pick is going to be. I believe the Steelers are bad enough to where they could end up as like a 4-win team this year. So I believe they're going to be there in the race for a top 3 pick at the end of the year with Denver if they continue to lose. So, I should say, I believe they will continue to lose. So we want them to bank a win here and there. This is a good opportunity. That gets us to Sunday night, Chiefs and Chargers. I don't see where this one really matters. I don't see how this one matters. Both teams play the Broncos twice, so strength of schedule doesn't matter. We play both teams once, so it doesn't even matter on that level. Both AFC teams. Root for whoever you want, honestly. I can't imagine a scenario where this ends up mattering at all for the Seahawks or the Broncos. I guess if the Chargers lose, the Broncos being able to revive their season and get back in the playoff race becomes slightly more likely, but it's not going to happen, not with that end of season schedule, so whatever. And then Monday night, we got the 49ers and the Cardinals, and I think it's pretty obvious here. The Cardinals, regardless of whether or not they're able to scrape together a win or 2 here, I think they're done. And even if they're not done, we own the tiebreaker, so there's less to fear. Meanwhile, the Niners are the team that is currently expected to get back in the division race and take the division title away from Seattle, who currently holds it. In fact, if they win this game, they will be in first place. So very obviously rooting for the Cardinals here. That's no problem. And that's it for Week 11. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you disagree, if you see an angle I don't. See you guys tonight during the Thursday Night Football game. Go Hawks.